But I also think in terms of the political side of reconciliation, knowing that there is a federal election around the corner, my hope is that the various parties will develop a platform around how they envision reconciliation as part of their election platform. So I would hope that that would happen with all of the federal parties, because I think certainly Canadians have a responsibility, but I also feel governments have a bigger responsibility because they have the fiduciary obligation for Indigenous peoples. Yes, ma'am?
Thank you. As a student of literature, I feel that literature has an amazing capacity to portray human suffering and to also elicit sympathy. And the reason I'm here today is to share that I think that if we could incorporate more Aboriginal literature, it could be one way to facilitate learning and healing. Because the way that I learned about this struggle is through my literature class. And my professor, I felt like there was a little bit of activism on her part in the way she promoted the contents of the syllabus. For instance, she put like a fairly good amount of the class was composed of various minority literature. For instance, the Chinese struggle, the railway that we talked about, and also some very interesting Aboriginal literature that she brought up was by E. Pauline Johnson. I'm not sure if you've heard of her, but that has really helped to educate me on the struggle, and I'm sure other students. And one of the questions that she asked at the beginning of the class, when we started As It Was in the Beginning, which is a short story by E. Pauline Johnson, was how many of you have learned about the residential school history in high school? And I don't think very many people, I don't think anyone raised their hands. So I think throughout various periods in our history, Canadian history, and various people's culture, people have pushed for their own literature because they want their own self-representation. And outside of this one literature class, I haven't come across any Aboriginal literature. Say, for instance, and like I'd say that I read a lot, and I think that it's something that we could promote, and I think that it does have some value in teaching, especially young people, because I think that the healing has to start with empathy. I think that the messages that, as portrayed in my literature class, the message that we've been getting is very negative, and I think that what we need to do is to start to elicit empathy from, especially starting with like maybe people in high school, even the general public. And I think that literature has some value I think it has a lot of value in promoting that. So that's just what I'd like to share, is that if we could promote more Aboriginal literature, not only in the curriculum, but even in the public space. So for instance, well, why aren't we having Aboriginal literature displayed like in the front cases of the library when you walk into the door, or maybe on the CBC, or any public space? We really have to push for this, because you know, when people want to, like, you know, when people are trying to get something done, you really have to put it in front of people, because we have so much information coming at us. We really have to like put it out there. So that's just what I want to share. Thank you.
Last year, I had the great privilege to go into the Rideau High School, and we did a collaborative workshop with youth from refugee families and Indigenous youth who are descendants of survivors. And out of that process, they developed a spoken word performance. And what was so amazing it was that the youth from refugee families totally connected with the Indigenous youth experience of cultural displacement, violence, and all of those things. So I'm a firm believer in utilizing the arts to cultivate not only awareness, but also to empower our voices, our diverse voices across the country. And Pauline Johnson was actually one of my most favorite writers, and I always remember this poem that she wrote called The Cattle Thief. And if you read The Cattle Thief, it's still as relevant today, those words that she expressed in that poem, because the cattle thief was the metaphor for the theft of Indian lands. And when I went to residential school, if it wasn't for books, if it wasn't for the library in my school, I wouldn't have, that was my safe place. Because as a child, because of my size, I was always bullied. And so my little safe haven was the library. And I became, a lover of books. And to this day, that has helped sustain me in many ways in learning about many things in my life. There are a number of fantastic literary publications that are available for free. If you go to the Aboriginal Healing Foundation, they have commissioned a series of volumes written by diverse Canadian writers from different communities, speaking to truth and reconciliation, and using the written word to talk about Canadians' perceptions around truth and reconciliation.
I'm tall. Thanks, Viola, so much for your talk. And my name is Joyce Hardman, and I'm from Ottawa, and I'm convening a Right Relations network here in Ottawa that I want you to know about in case you're interested, of people from 7, 8 different churches and different communities who come together every month or so to learn together, to support each other, to be supporting justice and reconciliation. So I'm here. If you want to connect, you can connect. I'm originally from Ohio. I have a book of my own family history that tells the story of giving over the lands of the Western Reserve from it being taken from the chiefs there that came together in good faith to do a treaty. And the book actually tells that the people were crying at the end as they walked away. And that was my great-great-great-grandparents that lived on that land. So maybe a lot of you have that in your history as well. So what we're doing this fall is we'll be studying the book Unsettling the Settler, which is an amazing book for us colonizers to learn we still have a mind state that's still doing this. And it's very humbling and very powerful. So come on board or read something, and maybe you would like to talk about the Covenant Chain Link event too.
There's also a book club here in Ottawa that focuses on truth and reconciliation, and that's actually being initiated by Sue, who's active within the United Church. So if there are folks in Ottawa that are interested in that book club, I would be more than happy to forward her contact information. Kairos, in collaboration with Reconciliation Canada, will be hosting its 5th annual Covenant to Chain event in October of this year. And the focus of Covenant of Chain is really to reach out to educators and folks within the education system to become aware of various curriculum and resources that are available that have been developed from an Indigenous worldview that they can utilize within their classrooms. And so if you go to the Kairos website and Google Kairos Ottawa, you will see the registration form and the agenda for the upcoming Covenant of Chain event in October of this year. And folks are welcome to also sign a newsletter form here so that Reconciliation Canada can forward you other reconciliation events going on across the country.
My name's Theo. To me, residential schools, boarding schools, training schools, they're a tactic of warfare, and they've been used globally. And in Hitler's handwritten biography, he wrote about how he got the idea of concentration camps from the founders of residential schools here in Canada and America. Then I found out that residential schools predate both Canada and America's founding dates, and I found that very interesting. That's how I developed the idea it's a tactic of war. When Hitler was on trial in the Nuremberg trials, my friend and I were working on a documentary revitalizing our language, Anishinaabe, and we came across something interesting. I'm just wondering if you heard about it. Have you heard anything about the Nuremberg trials and how Hitler stated during his trial that why are you prosecuting me when you've done this to the Indians overseas for 500 years? Did you ever hear that? And as well, I was wondering if any other nations around the globe have maybe sought collaboration with us in utilizing this format for their own reconciliation for the genocide that's been placed against themselves.
Down in the United States, they actually came and met with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, and they do have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission established in the state of Maine, and their commission is looking at the high abduction rates of Native American children into the child welfare system. As well, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada a couple of years ago had met with various previous Truth and Reconciliation Commissions around the world. And the hope was to build on an international connection on Truth and Reconciliation Commissions to see what can we learn from other truth commissions in terms of, what worked well, what didn't work well. What are some of the things we can learn that can strengthen, the Truth Commission process in Canada? And the other thing I wanted to say about residential schools, you're absolutely right that it wasn't unique to Canada, that it was residential schools existed all over the world. But what makes the residential school system in Canada different than all the other schools is that parents had the choice to send their children to residential schools in New Zealand or in England or in other countries. Whereas in Canada, parents didn't have a choice because it was mandatory law. And the other thing that I wanted to mention about that is that the whole idea of residential schools actually came from the American experience, because they call them boarding schools in the United States. And when Sir John A. Macdonald was the Prime Minister of Canada, he had requested this character by the name of Darwin, who was a journalist, to go down and study the boarding school system in the States to see how that could be applied in Canada. And so that's where John A. Macdonald, who was the same Prime Minister that invoked the mistreatment of Japanese and Chinese Canadians, that's where he got the idea from.
Thank you.
Bonjour. N'indishna cause living gimiwan, Benezi was a soon, and Nepki was you. I want to say miigwech to you. My name is Summer Rain. I am from Portland First Nation. I'm the Aboriginal rep on the Ontario Council for the PSAC. My mother was a residential school survivor, and my brothers and sisters, myself, have suffered the after effects of what the residential schools did to my mother. And I just want to say, when you talked about the march, how much rain you got, I believe that was the tears of all those spirits of those residential school children, and the ones that are no longer with us that could join you in this in your work. And I just want to say miigwech, and please continue with this work because it's very important.
Beautiful.
In that area of the province, the residential school that operated there was St. Anne's, and had the most notorious record of mistreatment of children. They did all kinds of nutrition experiments as well as medical experiments, as well as utilizing the electric chair on children. And for many years, the survivors were trying to access the records of that investigation that occurred with the police. And they had to go to court to fight the government to release those records so that they could proceed with their healing journey. And to this day, we're still faced with the challenges of the Catholic Church not honoring the settlement agreement. Even though they were the largest administrator of the residential schools, they have not fulfilled honoring the agreement by contributing the resources from their church for healing programs across the country. And so that court date has been postponed until the fall. And so I would encourage any of you who may be of the Catholic faith to enlighten the church to say, let's move forward in a good way and honor our obligation to this agreement. Because I think by not honoring it, you're dragging out the pain and the continued suffering of our people who want to have closure to that chapter in their life. And of course, as survivors, we will never forget that experience. It will always be with us because of the trauma that we've all experienced in many different ways, including the children. But our hope is that looking at strengthening our beautiful cultural traditions will help with our healing journey.
Thank you again, Viola, for your witness to us today. My name is Brian McIntosh. I'm with the United Church, and I remember the Commission on Aboriginal Peoples in 1996 that George Erasmus led, and the exhaustive report and recommendations that were basically shelved at that time. And 18 years later, we're drawing to a close now, and next year the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the commissioners will make a report. And I'm concerned that under the current government, who apologized in 2008, but since then have shown basic disregard for changing things in this country with regard to the rights and autonomy of Indigenous peoples, that the report, when it's made, will be similarly dealt with. And it's a big concern of many of us that settler Canada is not quite yet in a place to demand that the report be dealt with in a way it should be. And so I guess I'm wondering your opinion as a long-time leader in the movement for justice among your people. Has there been a change from 96 to 2014, 2015 that gives you any hope that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report will be dealt with in a way that's different and more, that it's implemented better than the 96 Commission report?
I want to respond in a number of ways. My activist side says self. This is called the People's Social Forum. Self, it is the people who elect the government. Self, The People's Social Forum is a springboard opportunity to catalyze a movement to galvanize the rights of Indigenous people. They called this country democratic. They said that they repatriated Canada from England. They said that we have democratic institutions in this country. They say we have freedom of expression. Why is it that our people who are defending the water and the land are being criminalized? Why is it that under our political institutions they follow a British parliamentary system that is non-inclusive in styles of governance or leadership? How and why isn't it we couldn't create a democratic system that truly reflects our beautiful geographical and cultural diversities of peoples of Canada? Why is it we have to follow a British parliamentary rule that creates hierarchy and division between people, between human beings? Why isn't it that we as Canadian people can't re-envision a more democratic system that is inclusive of all human beings, regardless of their race, creed, color, or sexual orientation? For sure.
My name is Sean. I'm from Couchiching First Nations. We're residing right now in Kitchener-Waterloo. First of all, I just wanted to say miigwech for sharing your story with us. I know it takes a lot to be up there in front of a group of people and share that with us, so I just want to say miigwech. I also wanted to say, you were asking like what reconciliation looks like, and for me, with the work that I do, I've had the opportunity, and I'm so grateful to work with my own mother within our communities and to share our story about, she's a residential school survivor from Fort Frances, Ontario, and she's a recovering alcoholic, I'm a recovering drug addict. So together we go out to the community and to classrooms and share our story about the impact that the residential school system has had on our lives and what intergenerational trauma looks like. And not only that, but we also talk about the tools that we've used to help on our own journeys of recovery and healing together, and what's worked for us. And one thing that I've come across in my experience with the classrooms that I talked to about the impact it's had on me and my mother is that there's still so many people that don't know what a residential school system is. And it's really unfortunate, especially like even talking to university students. I have so many people who come up to me after our presentations and say, hey, you know what, thank you so much. I never heard of this before. So I just wanted to say, like, I firmly believe it begins with education, right? And somebody was talking about the importance of having this in literature, and that's so important that we do that. So I really just wanted to say miigwech for coming down here and sharing your story with us. It means a lot. Thank you.
You know, getting back to education, in Nova Scotia, you know, it's really interesting. They were one of the first regions in the country to change the Education Act so that it made it mandatory that there be much more inclusive in terms of their school board trustee, as well as offering their indigenous languages to be made available in the public education system. And they made it mandatory to hire X amount of indigenous educators. And so certainly, because they were having the same challenges as our people with having the high push-out rate of youth in the public education system, they collaborated with the Indigenous peoples to amend the Education Act, to revise the curriculum, and to ensure that there were X amount of Black trustees, Indigenous trustees, educators, and counselors within the education system, so that it was more reflective of the communities in which those education systems exist. So, and there's been so many studies done, around Indian control of Indian education. And the Mohawk people, they have a number of years ago had initiated a study exploring the value in learning your language and what the connection was to the success rate of their learners. And what they discovered was that for their youth who were able to learn in their mother tongue, went on to be honors students at the university levels. So no matter which way you look at it, the beauty of languages and the right to our language needs to be made available within our education system and not be limited to just on-reserve initiatives. I think our time is coming to a close, and I want to thank you as the people. You have the power. We have the power collectively, and I wish those of you a safe journey home if you've come from a distance. And please feel free to pop by on the side here. I have some material that I can share with you, or if you want to sign up for our newsletter, to join us in organizing reconciliation events across the country, we would welcome that collaboration. All my relations. Thank you to the interpreters.